All right. So I don't know if any of you caught the error in the video where it said groups S tart. I won't tell you who edits video here because it'd be very embarrassing for them to be telling the entire room that they did that. But I probably should have people proof my work in the future. Today is my oldest, my daughter's Brooklyn. It's her last Sunday in City North Kids as an official City North Kids kid, which is so hard to believe. For those of you who do not know Brooklyn, Brooklyn feels everything really big. And so she is a complete train wreck back there right now. She's crying all over the place and just sad that this chapter of her life is coming to an end. But it got me thinking some this week, kind of going into this about her life. And you know, when you have your first kid as a parent, it changes everything. And there's all these new things and you don't have any idea what you're doing. And there's just like you just pray all the time. Like, God, can we keep them alive? Can we just not kill them? That'd be like, can you help us just please? I remember one of the moments, I'm going to tell a story that's kind of gross, okay? But it's going someplace. So I remember one of the moments where it really kind of felt like we were in over our heads. There's a difference between baby spit up and child vomit, right? Like there's a difference in those things. And I remember the first time we really experienced the difference in those things. We were living in Kentucky at the time. I don't recall exactly what the situation was, but for some reason, Vanessa was gone. She was elsewhere. She was out with friends or something. And I had Brooklyn at home by myself. And so things are going great until they weren't. So I had put Brooklyn to bed for the night, and Brooklyn was a really good sleeper at that age. And she was somewhere around a year-ish old. And so I'd put her to bed and she was sleeping, and then all at once she woke up and she started, just like crying so uncontrollably, and that was uncharacteristic. So, I went to see what was going on and kind of get her calmed back down, and I did, and then I left the room, and a few minutes later she started crying really, really hard again, and I went back in and I picked her up, and I don't recall exactly how old she was, but she was old enough that she had started talking a little bit. Now, Brooklyn started talking at 10 months old and has not shut up a day since. So she was always articulate and could express things. And somehow or another, she communicated that her belly was hurting. So I'm like, okay, well, what do we do with this? Then I started to feel her belly retch. I was holding her I was holding her tight to comfort her, and I could feel her stomach retching. So I have this moment of complete panic. Like, I know what to do when my belly does that. I don't know what to do when my year-old's belly does that. So I run her into the bathroom, and all I could think was, I don't want her to feel like she's alone. And so I didn't want to just hold her over a toilet, To be clear, that would have been the smarter move than what I did. What I did was I got in the bathtub and just held her. And again, as a reminder, this was the first experience of not baby spit up. We had had spaghetti or something for dinner. It was and I just held her, just everywhere. So she finishes, she's crying. We're in the bathtub. It's everywhere. Now I'm like, well, what do I even do now? I guess I turned the water on. So I turned the water on. And I got us cleaned up-ish. I stripped down to just my boxers or boxer briefs, and I'm holding her, and I've got her stripped down, and we get relatively clean. I'm like, all right. So we get through this. I get her out, starting to get her dressed to get her settled back in, and it starts again. She starts crying. I pick her up. I feel the belly. I'm like, well, back to the shower we go. I hadn't even gotten dressed yet, so I get back in the shower. Happens again, everywhere, how is this much food in you? Well, about the time that she finished up, I hear the garage door open. Vanessa! I need you. Now, to be clear, those are not words that I say often. I'm a very independent person. I don't need a lot of help with things. It's very rare that, and I'm like, Vanessa, I need you now. So she's hustling up the steps and she's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And she turns the corner and comes into the bathroom and goes, like you see what you need or what I need. She helps me get cleaned up. We get, it's a memory that's seared into my brain for all of time. I can promise you I'll hold the kid over the toilet the next time. Like, it hasn't happened again, but they'll be over the toilet. I don't really care if they feel alone or not at that moment. They're going to be over the toilet the next time it happens. Now, here's why I tell you that. Because we're in a series called Christian-ish. And in this message series, we're identifying a problem that we run into a lot of time as Christians. The series is called Christian-ish, and we're working off of a definition of what it means to be Christian-ish. The definition is this, that to be Christian-ish is to be Christian enough to believe in Jesus, but not to behave like Jesus. And this is a big deal because in Revelation chapter 3, God identifies through this vision that's nauseating to him. So we read this verse in the first week. It's not in your message notes, but Jesus actually says this. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. And we talked about how that word in the Greek, spit you, is a word that essentially means projectile vomit. So I don't love starting with a story like that, although the laughs were nice. But what I do want I want us to have an image in our mind that is real. An image that is accurate to what Jesus is saying. So because you're neither hot nor cold, because you're in the middle, because you're Christian-ish, I'm about to bleh. It's nauseating to God when we're on the fence. It's nauseating to God when we're in the middle. It's nauseating to him. And so in the series, what we've done the first week, I kind of set this all up and talked about why that's such a big deal. Because I think sometimes it's hard for us to wrap our heads around why is that so offensive to God? So I talked about that a little bit. And then last week, today, and not next Sunday because we have Serve Sunday next week, but the week after that, we'll wrap the series. And in these 3 weeks, what we're doing is we're talking about some things that can cause issues for us. Because in the first week, we identified the way we prevent ourselves from being Christian-ish. And so, since some of you weren't here, I want to get you caught up on that real quick. So I'm going to read a passage that we read week 1, and then we're going to work from there today. This is what Jesus says in John chapter 15. He's talking to his disciples, and he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit, but apart from me, you can do nothing. And he continues and kind of just circles around this same idea. If you do not remain in me, you're like a branch that's thrown away and it withers. And such branches are picked up, they're thrown into the fire, and they're burned. In other words, they're worthless. But if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it'll be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. In other words, if we want to avoid being Christian-ish, if we want to avoid believing in Jesus enough to say we believe in him and maybe do some religious things, but not enough for it to really change how we live, what Jesus is saying is we have to stay connected to him. We have to stay connected to the vine. Because when we stay connected to the vine, we produce the fruit in our lives that is proof that we're his. Now, the problem is that for a lot of us, we've maybe spent, in some cases, years, trying to remain connected to the vine, but for whatever reason, it just feels like it doesn't work. We've tried to stay connected to Jesus. We've tried. We've done all the religious things. We've gone to church and we've been in small groups and we've served and we've given and we've done all the religious stuff. We've run the playbook, but something still it didn't work. Or at least it didn't work maybe how we expected. And so that's what last week, today, and then in 2 weeks are all about. Because there are some things that will disconnect us from the vine that in some cases we're not even aware of. So last week we identified the first of those things. Today we're going to identify the second, and in 2 weeks we're going to identify the third thing that if we're not really careful, may be present in our lives already. And it may be that if you've had a hard time truly feeling like, well, I'm doing all the right things, but something's still just not right, it might be that 1, 2, or even all 3 of these things are present in your life in some capacity. And without knowing it, you have disconnected yourself from the vine, even though you're trying your very best, okay? So if you missed last week, you can always go online to citynorth.church. I also want to mention real quick, I had a couple people reach out to me this week asking about like when the sermon was going to get posted online because they wanted to go back and watch it. You can always go to our website, even if YouTube is not updated yet, you can always go to our website, citynorth.church, and there's a button that says watch live. And if you go to that button throughout the whole week, the previous week's service will be available on demand. So if you miss and you want to catch up and you don't want to wait on YouTube, because sometimes it takes a few days just to get all that stuff going, and that's no big deal. But if it takes a minute and you want to get caught up, you can always go to our website and catch up there. So if you want to do that, feel free. Today what we're doing is we're covering the second of those 3 things, if something still feels off. Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to continue from what we just read, this fruit and vine verse. We're going to continue it because after Jesus taught that, he didn't stop where we stopped. He kept teaching his followers, his disciples. And this is what he said. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain, there's that word again, now remain in my love. And then Jesus starts to identify what it means to remain in his love. And he says, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, if you want to be my followers, you got to do what I do. And what I do is I listen to my Father and I do what he says. And so you need to listen to me. Then he says, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. And last week we left off right there, which is great. We identified the first of the things that can disconnect us. If we aren't keeping God's commands, if we're practicing selective obedience and we're only keeping some of God's commands, we will disconnect right now. Period. But that wasn't the end of what Jesus said. As he continued, this is the very next thing he says. My command is this. Love each other as I have loved you. You'll remain in my love if you keep my commands. Plural, commands. My command, singular, is this: love one another. Now, the second I read this, it was funny, this week my family's doing this big puzzle right now, which we have historically not done as a family. This is kind of a new adventure for us. So we went from not puzzles to 2,000-piece puzzles because that seemed great. I'm really good at puzzles. I love puzzles. I have this ability to like see the whole thing and look at a piece and go, that piece goes there. It drives my wife bonkers. Drives Vanessa crazy. Drives my kids crazy. My mom was over this week. She was helping us with a puzzle. And she had this piece, and I said, oh, that piece goes there. And she kind of paused, and she said, you have way too much understanding of what's happening at all the places in this puzzle. I was like, I know. That's my superpower. That's what I'm good at. So like for those of you that really like the way that I teach and I preach and the way I connect the Bible in all these different places, I'm like, that's what it is. I see all these connections and all these webs. I see the way that thing goes to that thing and then that thing goes to that thing, and I can't keep a calendar, but I can connect stuff that nobody else can connect. I love it. So as soon as I read this, that commands command, it reminds me instantly of the great commandment. This one isn't in your message notes, but at one point, some people came to Jesus, some teachers, and they said, what's the most important commandment? And they're trying to trap him. And Jesus said the most important command is to love the Lord your God with all that you are and to love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said all the law and the prophets. In other words, all the rules that they were trying to trap him in, he said all of that, it's summed up by those. So in other words, as Jesus says, obey my commands, plural, and then he says, now, here's my command, singular, he's doing the same thing. He's identifying that there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of commands he's going to give us throughout our lives. But at the end of the day, if we remain in his love and if we love people, that's really what he's looking for. My command is this: love your neighbor, or love each other as I have loved you. Well, what does that mean? Good thing Jesus doesn't stop. He says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So love each other like I loved you. I'm about to go die for you. That's what love looks like. And now Jesus comes back to the command. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends, for everything I learned from my Father I've made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit. See, it's all connected. So that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. And then Jesus closes this little part of the teaching by repeating it. This is my command: love each other. Now, the context is critical here. These instructions Jesus is giving to his disciples. He's talking to them about their relationships with each other. Love each other as I have loved you. He's not saying love the whole world as I have loved you. Now, to be clear, Jesus does say that at other points. But in this particular moment, what he's doing is he's saying it is critical that you love each other. You are my followers. You are my children. You are my disciples. And what Jesus is establishing here is a critically important truth for Christians down through the generations. So this is not love all people. This is love each other. So let's bring it back. If we want to be connected to the vine so that we can bear the right fruit, so that we can guarantee we're not Christian-ish, we've got to make sure that we are obeying God's commands. We also have to make sure we're loving each other, because that is the summary of the commands. It's to love each other. And so if you're struggling with disconnection in your relationship with God, it might be because if you want to avoid being Christian-ish, you don't get to choose. You can't choose who and how to love. You don't get to choose who and how to love. Dave, that's, if you'll pull that up for me. You don't get to choose. Jesus already told you. You don't get to decide. If you want to remain in my love, obey my commands. My command is this: love each other. Jesus is saying this to 12 individual people. Now, I don't know if you've ever known 12 individual people in your life. In any group of 12, there's some differences. You know, probably some big ones. In any group of 12, there's going to be different ways of seeing things. There's going to be different opinions. There's going to be different thoughts. Love each other as I have loved you. If you don't love each other, you're going to be disconnected from the vine. It's just the way it is. Why does this matter? Well, if you fast forward a few years, what happens is Jesus ascends into heaven. The disciples begin to form the first churches in the world, the first churches of Jesus Christ in the world, the first Christian communities in the world. And through the teachings of Jesus and of the Apostle Paul and of some of the earliest teachers, this idea was established that the church is the family of God, that the church are the children of God, that we as Christians are brothers and sisters. We're brother, and we use this language like this is not abnormal language. You know this. We say church family, church family, church family. You're my brothers and my sisters. I'm your brother. But we don't really think about the implications of that. Why is this so important to God? Well, let me tell you. Because if we walked out of this service today, out of this room today, we walked into that lobby and one of my kids came out into the lobby and I happened to overhear you treating my kid poorly, I wouldn't be happy with you. If I overheard you talking to someone else about my kid, I wouldn't be happy with you. If I overheard you disparaging my child, we'd need to have a talk, because that child is my flesh and blood. And I love you, but I love them too. And so when Christians, when followers of Jesus, when disciples of Christ do not love one another, what it says to our Father in heaven is we don't like our siblings. And God isn't real happy when that's the case. So why is it critical that we love one another? Because we're God's kids. We're all God's kids. And no matter how mad you might get or how upset you might be with one of God's kids, it's still God's kid. Unity is a giant deal throughout the New Testament, throughout the letters of Paul. And this is why it's such a big deal. Because when we don't love one another, Jesus said, love each other. If two of the disciples had been fighting, Jesus had been like, you better figure this out, because you're both my kids. Sometimes I have to do this with my own kids. I've had multiple conversations with each of them along the way where I've been like, I don't know what's going on between the two of you right now, but I love both of you, so you better figure out how to get along, because I'm not getting rid of one. And I think that's the way God looks at us when we don't love each other. We don't get to choose who and how we love. This is why it matters. For some reason as Christians, it's like we misjudge how seriously God takes siblings loving each other, his kids loving each other, but he takes it seriously. And so that leaves one big important question. What does that even look like to love our brothers and sisters? And this is a tremendously challenging idea. And it's so challenging because we have a very difficult time defining what love is culturally. Because culturally, we define love however we want. I love this cell phone. I also love my wife. Do those mean the same thing? Hopefully not. I love softball. I love golf. I love basketball. I love so much peaches. I love them. I love them. I could eat a peach every day for the rest of my life. I love them. Right now, I'm getting cucumbers out of my garden like crazy. I love garden cucumbers. Oh my God, they're amazing. I also love Mason, Brooklyn, and Gavin. Were those the same thing? They're not. But even more critically, not only do we have a hard time even narrowing down what it means, culturally, we also like to allow room for everybody to interpret it however they want. And so there's no center of what does it mean to love. Well, the problem is that when Jesus issues this command, when he says, my command is to love each other, he was not thinking about it the way we think about it. There was a center. There was a truth. There was a reality of what it meant to love each other. So we're going to spend a few minutes there, and then we're going to finish this up. There's two important passages that we're going to look at today for clues. Not for clues, for a definition of what it means to love one another. Now, Jesus started us off a minute ago, and he says, love each other like I've loved you. You give up your life for each other. But even then, what does that specifically mean? So the first thing we're going to look at is from the book of 1 John. We're not actually going to look to the words of Jesus here. We're going to look to the words of people who knew Jesus and who were then giving instructions to his people about how to love one another. This is from 1 John chapter 3. I'm going to read verses 11 through 18, but a couple of these verses aren't in your handout because there just wasn't room for them, but I'm going to read through the whole passage. So 1 John chapter 3, verse 11. For this is the message you have heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Real quick pause, just to be clear. 1 John was most likely written by the same guy who wrote John. So when Jesus gave the instructions in John that we read just a moment ago, John then took those words and wrote some instructions. John was actually a pastor. He was an elder in an early church, and he was writing these words to deal with issues inside the church that he was responsible for. And so he begins to flesh out what it actually meant from someone who knew and walked with Jesus. What does it mean to love one another? So this is what he says. You've heard this. So he says, don't be like Cain. And he's referencing a figure from super early on in the Bible. Don't be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. In other words, because God was pleased with his brother and he was displeased with Cain, so Cain got jealous and he murdered him. Do not be surprised, he continues, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love each other. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates a brother or sister, not who hates anyone, anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. Anyone who hates a brother or sister. And then he continues, this is how we know what love is. The parallels between these passages are so fascinating. John says, Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. That's the same thing Jesus said. This is how we know what love is. Jesus laid down his life. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And then he gives some teeth to it. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but in actions and truth. Now, again, let's connect some dots here. This isn't in your this passage is in your notes, but this sounds identical to what Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, verse 21, Jesus is teaching and he says, anyone who hates their brother or sister is a murderer. John's just echoing Jesus. He's saying, look, I walked with this man. I know this man. I'm expanding on what he said. I'm giving teeth to it in our particular context. And so what clues can we see here? That actions and attitudes matter. They matter a lot. Actions and attitude matter. It's not just the words you say. Because, you know, it's easy to say words that aren't backed up by anything underneath. It's easy to say one thing and behave in a way that communicates the opposite. And frankly, it's easy to use words so you don't have to identify the underlying actions when the underlying actions are destructive. So, actions and attitude, they matter. So that's one clue we're going to look at here. What's the other one? What does it look like to lay down our lives? What does love look like practically? We could still be, to me at this point, it's like, okay, I feel like I'm starting to get an idea, but I think we could still be a little bit more specific. So we're going to jump to the Apostle Paul. In one of the most famous chapters in the Bible. In fact, I'm doing a wedding this weekend. Mike and Maddie, who are part of our church, are getting married this week on Friday, and I get to do that wedding. Yeah, it's great, awesome. And I'm going to read 1 Corinthians 13 because everybody reads 1 Corinthians 13 at a wedding, okay? But sometimes we leave it in weddings and we forget that that isn't about marriage. It's about love. Now, love's an important part of marriage, but it's also an important part of every relationship we have as Jesus followers. So this is what the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I'm increasingly becoming a fan of ChatGPT. I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, will you take 1 Corinthians 13, these verses? I pasted it in. And I said, will you draw out a table for me of each individual characteristic that Paul identifies and compare it and contrast it with kind of the typical Western view of love? And let me just tell you, what it spit out to me is fascinating. So again, context. Jesus says, if you obey my commands, you'll remain in my love. My command is to love each other the same way I've loved you, to lay down your life for one another. John echoes it, lay down your life. That's what it looks like to love. Well, what does it look like to lay down your life? It looks like this. But this is so different than the way we think about love in America. So let me just read a bit of this. Biblical love. Love is patient. What is Western cultural love? Love is often urgent. It's demanding, and it often expects instant gratification. In other words, if you love me, you'll do what I need right now. And if needs aren't met, just as quickly as people fell in love, they fall out of it. But that's not love at all. Love is kind. When Western culture, love is often equated with niceness when convenient. Boy, ChatGPT knows us better than we know us. Niceness when convenient, but can turn harsh or indifferent when feelings fade. Love does not envy. Well, in Western culture, love is frequently tangled with jealousy and with comparison, wanting what others have or fear of losing affection to someone else. Paul says love does not boast. But in Western culture, love is often used as a status symbol of the health and significance of your relationship. Hashtag couple goals. Love is not proud. Well, in Western love often feeds my ego and my identity. I'm only as valuable as the people who love me say I am. I need the affection. I need the acceptance. I need other people, or else I don't have any sense of who I am at all. Love does not dishonor others, according to Paul. But in Western culture, relationships sometimes normalize things like shaming one another, disrespecting one another, inappropriate levels of sarcasm, or even betrayal as a part of what love is. It's going to get real good in a minute. It is not self-seeking. Well, Western cultural love often asks, what am I getting? What's in this for me? Are my needs being met? Well, if my needs aren't being met, then this is what ChatGPT said. Cultural love often asks, what am I getting out of this relationship, rather than saying, what can I give? Because Paul said it's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. In Western culture, love is often volatile, reactive, and quick-tempered. Breakups and fights are seen as normal if feelings are hurt. I don't like that one very much. Just not a fan. I get angered pretty easily. I can get a little argumentative. I can get a little defensive. I can get a little, well, I'm right and you all are idiots. Love keeps, according to Paul, no record of wrongs. What ChatGPT said is that love in practice often holds grudges, brings up past mistakes, or uses them as leverage. Whew. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. Culture, according to ChatGPT, sometimes treats love as permissive. In other words, ignoring harmful behavior because I love them. Or it celebrates what feels good, even if what feels good is destructive. I mean, seriously, like, it always protects, Paul says. ChatGPT says in Western culture, love often prioritizes self-protection, even at the cost of abandoning others. Paul says love always trusts. ChatGPT says cultural love is skeptical, it's guarded, and it often assumes betrayal is inevitable. Paul says love always hopes. ChatGPT says that culturally in the West, love is often seen as fragile and conditional. If things don't work out, hope is lost and love ends. And Paul closes by saying love always perseveres. ChatGPT says that in the West, love is often seen as disposable. When things get hard, it's common to move on to a new relationship. Whoa. I don't particularly like this. I mean, I'm preaching it, but I don't particularly like it because I resonate with far more of those in my own life than I care to admit. And my guess is you do too. Because we've been so conditioned to protect ourselves. We've been so conditioned that we've got to, that it's our responsibility to make it, whatever that is. We've been so conditioned to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. But what happens in the end is all we end up doing is deciding who and how to love. Because if they don't meet our needs, if they don't accomplish what we want, if they don't reciprocate in the way we think, if they wrong us in some way, and by the way, they will because they're humans. If you're friends with me long enough, I promise you I'm going to do something that hurts you. And it's not going to be because I'm mean to. It's going to be because I just didn't know. Because I'm different than you and you're different than me. And when God calls a whole bunch of different people like the 12 disciples, he knows there's going to be conflict and there's going to be struggle because people are people are people are people. And so he says, obey my commands. My command is this: love each other. And when Jesus said that, I guarantee you, I promise you, that in his mind, he knew exactly what he was saying. He knew exactly that what he was identifying was, you're not gonna like each other all the time, but you don't get to choose if you love one another. You wanna know something? I don't like my kids all the time. I don't like my wife all the time. She left the room a minute ago, so she didn't hear me say that. And I know she doesn't like me. Probably more than I don't like her. And it's probably fair. But we don't get to choose if we love one another. So Jesus says, my command, obey my commands. That's how you abide in my love. That's how you remain in my love. My command is to love each other as I have loved you. I laid down my life for you. You're going to lay down your lives for one another. What does it look like to lay down your life? It looks like that. It looks like self-sacrificing care for the well-being of another person above yourself. In other words, I would say that what love does is love puts your brothers and sisters first in your words, your thoughts, and your actions. That's what love is. It puts your brothers and sisters, God's other kids, it puts them first. It puts them before you in the pecking order. It's not about how they benefit you. It's not about what they offer you. It's not about if they hurt you, if they wound you. It's not about that. It's about figuring out how to be a family because we are God's family. Now, I want to give two caveats very quickly. The first is I just said put people first, your brothers and sisters first. That's not actually the case. It just sounds better than put them second. First is God, okay? But if I say put people second, then some people are gonna go, cool, I get to be first. So God's first always. That's just like blanket statement. Outside of that, who's first? It isn't you, it's not me. It's your brothers and sisters. In our context, it's the people in this room sitting down the row from you, sitting a couple seats back. It's the people at Sunbury Christian Church and at Vineyard and at Delta Church and at Bright City Church. Our other brothers and sisters in this city. Because if God's kids can't get along, why would anybody want to be a part of that family? We've all got screwed up enough families in real life. So So you put your brothers and your sisters first in words, thought, and actions. Again, God is first. The second caveat I have to give very quickly is that doesn't mean allow anything. It doesn't mean be a doormat. Because love doesn't delight in evil. It rejoices in the truth. And if the truth is that there is wrong being perpetrated against you, it is appropriate and correct biblically to display love by drawing boundaries. But the boundary must be drawn with the goal being the good of the other. And it can be a hard, firm boundary that protects you, but it must also be with the intended benefit of the other. If that is absent, it is not love, it is self-preservation. Now, I'll close with this. You can't do this, and neither can I. That's the whole reason we have to stay connected to the vine. Because the vine is what produces the fruit in us that enables to love people this way, because on our own we are incapable of it. Because on our own, sometimes the wounds are too heavy. They're too deep. Because on our own, sometimes the pain's too great. But we don't get to pick and choose. And so we depend on the Lord and on His power and on what He can grow in us that we are utterly incapable of producing ourselves. Imagine a church full of brothers and sisters that loved each other this way. They exist, by the way. They do, but they're rare. Imagine a church full of brothers and sisters who say no matter what, we're family. No matter what, we're together. We're going to figure out our differences because we've got a world to tell about Jesus. And because He loved us enough to die for us, so we're going to figure out how to love each other enough to give up our desires and our preferences and our hurt and our wounds and our pain so that we can demonstrate to people that God is love. A church like that, it could change a city. A church like that could empower its people, the brothers and sisters, to live full of joy and full of life, not walking around scared and worried all the time about who they've offended and who they've upset and is that person and this person. They could be free. They could be free to shine the light of Jesus to a world that is lost and in darkness. Because at the end of the day, when Jesus says, love one another as I've loved you, He does it because the world that is lost in darkness will never see the light if we're too busy fighting with each other to light the candle. My command is this: love each other. You want to stay connected to the vine? Do you struggle with being Christian-ish? Do you feel like maybe sometimes I've been trying to do the right things, but something's just off? Do you love your brothers and sisters the way Jesus loved you? Have you let go of the wrongs? Have you moved on? Have you patient, kind? I didn't know what to do with this, so I'm going to somehow or another, I'm going to put this table on our website somewhere, probably on the live stream page, because I know at least 10 of you after the service are going to be like, can you send that to me? Can you send that to me? So I'll put it somewhere. When you look at it, I want you to be honest with yourself. Because if you're feeling disconnection from the vine and you look through that list and there's 1 ounce of conviction in your heart, I promise you that's why. My command is this: to love each other. We don't get to choose who and how to love. And what it looks like to love our brothers and sisters is with words, thoughts, and actions, all of who we are, so that they can have the life that God has given us too. Let's pray.